Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking here. Vincent will be here in hour number 2. But until then, he'll be talking with Bert Bertonis. But until then, I'm here. I'm keeping the chair warm for him. And with me today, or engineering the broadcast, is Jason, and I'm not sure if we can take phone calls today or not. The usual number is 866-582-9933. Okay, and joining us today is Cathy. Hi, Cathy. How are you?
Hi, Guineith. How are you? I'm fine.
Thank you. And we're going to be talking today about the differences between on-grid and off-grid living. So, and also on-grid and off-grid prepping as well. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I think I sent you an email a little bit earlier. Today, I'm interviewing Cathy, but in a week or two's time, I think that Cathy might be interviewing me. But I basically sent her an email earlier telling her something in my life story going back several generations. But I don't think we'll be talking about that now. But it is quite a difference. And, I've lived on grid before, and I've even done prepping on the grid, and it is a little bit different. Oh my gosh. But, that's, like I said, that's not what we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be the differences between being on the grid and being a prepper, and being off the grid and being a prepper. And if it seems as if I'm talking a bit sluggish, it's just after 2 a.m. in the morning here, and I have literally been awake for minutes before the broadcast. So I will hand it over to Cathy, and I'll let her... can you think of any differences? Could you tell us what it's like to be a prepper and to be, living on the grid and as a prepper, and the reasons why you're doing that?
Guineith, part of the reason why I believe I have done it, there's a few reasons. I think one is, first of all, I just have a sense that it's very wise to do that right now. I believe I started probably very slowly, but I think it was kind of in my blood because my grandparents and my father and mother grew up during the Depression. And I remember hearing stories about my dad saying that they didn't have, like, the shoes were worn out and they would put cardboard in the bottom. And he would walk miles to try to find jobs, to caddy, or to try to find yard work or or other jobs. And he talked about having, if they had bread, all they would have is lard, and they would sprinkle a little sugar on it. And sometimes that was either a meal or that was a snack at night if you were hungry. So I heard those stories, and my grandmother, she grew up in the Depression. She was born in the late 1800s. I think 1886 is when she was born, and she was raising a family when the Depression hit, and she almost lost her farm. But I didn't learn those skills because by the time I came around, she was probably close to 70, and I don't think she was aware, and she didn't, I mean, she talked about having chickens and things, but by that time she was not in good health, and so they moved into a rural area, but not on a farm. It was just a small house with a small yard so they can maintain it. So I think I heard and I lived those stories. So I started, I think, thinking about it when I had my children, and we lived out in the country, and we had a couple power outages, and I had 4 small children. And the first time it hit me, we had a well, and I didn't have any water. And that changed after that real quick. I quickly learned that this was my responsibility. So I started prepping slowly, and it was really starting in the basement. I asked my husband to buy shelves for me or cabinets, and I started buying canned goods and rice, and I ramped up my garden a little bit, and I would can, and we had farms around us, so I would buy things, and I would can quite a bit in the fall and make applesauce and canned tomatoes. So for me, it was watching the sign of the time. And I think that with the whole pandemic happening, I think if you haven't woken up and really realized that you have to try to be as independent as you can and do as much as you can and learn. So that's where I started, was just watching that I didn't want it to be dependent. I wanted to learn. And unfortunately, I'm not as knowledgeable as like you and Vince and Rich as far as the animal part of it. Mine are more on the sewing, the gardening, the outdoor, the canning, the dehydrating, the food process. A lot of that is mine, and I do small repairs and things like that, but that's really where I started, was just knowing how difficult it was for my mom and dad, and literally not having money. My aunt had one dress, and my grandmother would wash and iron that every couple days when she went to school. That's all the money that they had.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think that something that really came out when I was emailing you earlier was about how my family, they also had a pretty tough time during the Great Depression. And my family were also, they were actually often quite wealthy people. But there was one branch of the family in particular that really, during the Great Depression, did not have much money. But even those parts of the family that were more wealthy, that there had been poverty in the family for a few generations before that. And I think that this is the common theme that I'm noticing with talking with people that have become involved in prepping or that are interested in prepping, is that I often hear that their families had a really rough time during the Great Depression, or that their families were quite poor, and that they had maybe a lot of children and had to make ends meet, had to feed the children, and were not willing to just lie down and let their families be destroyed. This is a really, really common theme that I'm hearing a lot. And actually, I was just watching a video on the Great Depression this afternoon, and it was the same thing again, where you had families that were during the Depression, they were often quite wealthy families, and they lost everything. And if it hadn't been for Mum, or usually it was Mum, usually Dad was trying to find work, but usually it was Mum that was at home, and she would be learning how to keep chickens, learning to grow vegetables, learning how to mend, learning how to sew, and often learning how to fix things. Even something as a cooking pot with a hole in it, that can really ruin your night if that's your only cooking pot and you've got a tribe of children to feed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Guineith, and I remember reading a comment once when this pandemic first hit, and there was a woman who had a dog. And it really opened my eyes to see how people thought. And she said, well, I couldn't get any dog food, and I think my dog would starve. And the first thing I thought of was, you can feed your dog table food. You can feed them meat, and you can feed them carrots and vegetables and rice if you have to. I mean, the fact that she didn't even think about it told me that a lot of people just are not critically thinking.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And besides which, in the wild, dogs will only eat a couple of times a week, 2 or 3 times a week. And people have become real, and they will eat the most disgusting food that is completely inedible for humans, and yet dogs will eat it. People have become completely disconnected from reality. They have forgotten a whole lot of rural-type skills or preparedness-type skills. It's not just that they have forgotten how to cook and how to, how to grow food, how to keep chickens, or how to keep rabbits. They've almost forgotten how to keep themselves. Does that make sense? They don't even know what they ought to eat for themselves. So they're actually completely unable to provide for their own nutrition, let alone being able to find substitute foods for their dogs or for their cats. And here's another thing I've been hearing is people have been worried about their cats going hungry. I have never really genuinely heard of any cat that has really gone hungry when it's left to itself long term, because you let them outside and they might have no food for 2 or 3 days, and then they figure out how to catch birds, and they figure out how to catch rats and mice. And then they're not hungry again. Then they're never hungry again in their whole life. But people have forgotten that. Okay, we're heading into a break, and we'll be back on the other side of the break in a few minutes, and we'll be discussing more about preparedness on the grid versus preparedness off the grid, and also why people don't prepare. Isaac speaking. Vincent will be with us in hour number 2. But in the meantime, I'm keeping the chair warm for him. And I have Cathy with me on the line. And we're talking about today on-grid versus off-grid living, and also why people don't become preppers. And why is it, do you think, Cathy, the reason why people do not get involved in the preparedness way of life? Why do you think that is?
Well, I was thinking about this the last few days, and I have about 5 or 6 things that made me think that this is probably why some people don't. I think I think they're all probably pretty equal, but one of the things I think that if you say to someone that you are a prepper or that you are out rural, I think there's a perception that you're uneducated, or they mock you, or you're kind of humiliated, that you're not doing something like you're not a computer programmer, or you're not a professor at a university, so you don't have the same kind of intelligence. So I think some people are embarrassed to admit it, but I think, for me, I think some of the things that people don't, why they don't do it is, I think some people are overwhelmed, and instead of thinking, I will take it a little bit at a time, they just think, they throw their hands up. Or another reason, I think, is a lot of people have a lack of skills, and they probably feel the overwhelming pressure of how would they ever learn it. So those two, I think, are probably the one, but I think the other is people have the sense that it's always going to be like this. The government will take care of me. There are always going to be grocery stores. Instead of thinking, but what if I can't get it? Or can I do these myself? Not only that, it saves money. And one of the benefits that I have found living rural is the appreciation of, like, nature. To me, I go out in my yard, I go out in my garden, and to see the caterpillars and the birds and the fruits of my labor, and to watch butterflies, or, watch my dog, play in the yard and stuff, or the fish in the pond, and enjoy all that. I guess it just brings me closer to God and His awesome earth that He gave us and nature. But the couple of the things I think people just are not, they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the skills, and rather than saying, okay, I need to learn and I need to work at it, they just throw their hands up.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there. And the other thing is that, unfortunately, obviously this is not how I think, and this is not how you think, but there has been a lot of, let's just say, propaganda against people who are interested in survival and preparedness through the media. And this has been there's been a number of television shows over the years that they have tended to throw us in the tinfoil hat basket end of the spectrum, and that's certainly not true, And like I said, usually it's just because our own families have at one time or another fallen upon hard times. And we talk on this show a little bit about epigenetics, and what that means is it's a set of genetic and spiritual, a blend of spiritual and genetic traits that have led to a person's ancestors surviving, and that set of traits tends to get passed down through the generations. And maybe it is that people who, I certainly agree that people, I can hear music again. But on the other side of the break, we'll go into a bit more about why this is so, of why people, some people are preparedness-minded and other people are not. Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking here, keeping the chair warm for Vincent. Vincent will be on the show in hour number 2. In the meantime, I'm here with Cathy, and we're talking about preparedness on-grid and versus off-grid, and the reason why people don't prepare. And Cathy was talking before the break about the reasons why she thought that people didn't prepare. And the thing that really stood out to me was how you mentioned, Cathy, that there's a lot of what I would call normalcy bias out there, which means people think that the world will go on as it's always gone on. And people would think that this is something that, maybe only really urbanized people that they would think that way, and that maybe rural people would be a bit more accustomed to the world changing, because in the countryside, you're very aware that not every year is the same. And yet I had one of my friends say to me the other day, I had them say, so we all live this lifestyle, which is like the normie type lifestyle, and you live differently to all of us. So what makes you different to the rest of us? And it pretty well was. It was a couple of things. It was that another area that I have is common law activism, which means that I believe in standing on my common law rights, but we won't discuss that today. But it's also in the area of prepping. And this person had actually spent a lot of years at sea. And at sea, you've got to be prepared, because you're on a floating island, and you're on a floating island for months at a time. And if you don't have enough, then you're going to end up suffering in the end. And that's what we're like as preppers. We believe that you've got to have what you need to have before you need it, because when you need it, you might not be able to get it. Does that make sense? That's what you were saying. We're not taking for granted that what we need is going to be in the shops when we need to get it. And a lot of people in the normal world, in the normie world out there, they sort of can't see that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, Guineith, it really does. And I think that the points that you brought up about the normalcy bias, I mean, how many people actually say, oh, this is really great that you're prepping? Most people give you that, they think you're crazy look, and they don't agree with it. Or they believe, they'll say, and I've heard this to people, oh, I'm coming to your house. I've heard that a lot. Like they're going to let you do all the work, but I also think that there's some fear, because if you have to think about taking care of things yourself, then, and you don't feel confident, there's a fear that goes along with that you're not going to be able to take care of your family, so you just don't want to think about it. And I've had people just delete or comment like, oh, I'm not worried about that if I send them information.
Yeah, that can be a real problem. And if somebody said that to me, where I'll say, well, I normally don't advertise it. I normally just do it. That that I'm into preparedness, but it's people like I don't own a car that works, so I have to get friends to help me with transport, and that includes to the grocery store. So I have a particular friend that saw the multiple sacks of flour coming into my house, and it sort of like raised the question, well, what's this? What's happening here? And so I sort of explained that I could see that things were going south and that there was supply chain breakdowns and that sort of thing. And, that's the thing. You do tend to get looked at as if you have three heads. But I've gotten beyond the point of caring, and I've also generally just put it out there. By the way, I did a personality test the other day, and it said I'm very low on politeness. I'm say it in the nicest possible way. I'm not going to be very polite if random people come around here thinking that I'm going to help them out with food, because that ain't going to happen. And I'm not going to be very polite about it. Now, I have 2 sons, and if they came around hat in hand, you know, one of them's moved out and the other one's just about to move out. If in a crisis they came around hat in hand, of course I would help them. And I've told them ahead of time, listen, if you're in trouble, you can come home and I will help you, but you're going to have to work. You're not going to be freeloading. So this is, you know, but that's about, and I mean, your girlfriends maybe. You know, if you're that attached to them and you're living with them, or if you've gotten married and all of that, but you'd better let your girlfriends know ahead of time that they will be working too, and because I'm not going to have freeloaders around here, and I'm a pretty interesting and unique person. And so, like I say, that I'm on the bottom end of the politeness spectrum. And yeah. Anyway, this is it. So I don't really care that people think that I have 3 heads because I'm getting prepared. Because at the end of the day, I look at it like this. You might think that I've got 3 heads, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one who's surviving. I'm going to be the little red hen, and you're going to be the goose and the cow and the duck. So, which means that I'm going to be the one with the loaf of bread, and you're going to be the one who's sitting there watching me eat it. But you're not going to be, because you're not going to be around, because I'm not going to let you be around unless you're my son or my son's girlfriend. And even then, you're going to be made to work. So, yeah, I think that people who are, I think that that's what stops a lot of people, because I don't think a lot of people, I really think that a lot of people do care about what other people think about them. That can be a really big hindrance to them becoming involved in learning survival and preparedness type skills. Does that make sense, Cathy?
Oh, absolutely, Guineith. I think that I agree with you. I don't really tell people that much. There's a few people I will suggest. I had told one lady once, you know, when this whole thing first started, and all she said was, well, I'll just get 2 jars of peanut butter and I should be good. So wow. that was her assessment. So I think that if people are willing to listen, maybe you can go a little farther. I think one of the things that I know you have done, and Vince and probably all the instructors, is we have tried to refine and enhance our skills and our knowledge. And I am still going to try to do more of that through the winter when I'm not out in the garden, and just try to keep enhancing those skills and learning more things to be as independent as I can. And Guineith, I think one of the benefits for me with being at home is the fact that I have close relationship with my family. And I was a stay-at-home mom with 4 children, and it gave me the opportunity to spend a lot of time with my children and my family. But as my father got older and my mother-in-law got older, I was able to be caregivers, in a sense, to them, more my father than my mother-in-law. And I was able to help sister-in-laws and aunts and uncles as they got older. But I like the fact that I could have the relationship with my children, and all my children have come back to me and said that, Mom, we're so glad that you were home and that you were there if we were sick and if we needed someone. So I think that the relationship issue and the more time that you have for yourself and for them when you're not commuting and you're not having to buy expensive clothes and an expensive wardrobe, that's a real benefit to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean there, because I also homeschooled my children for a number of years. And, you know, it's a funny thing, because in our family, we're all type A personalities. We're all alphas in our family. So you get 3 alphas. And my husband was an alpha as well, by the way, but he died in 2003 when my boys were babies. But you get 3 type A personalities, you know, communicating with each other. And it can be a really interesting conversation, and it can look to outsiders like you're all locking horns, when actually you're actually just having a really animated discussion. You're just working things out. And, you know, but the thing is, we had a group call the other day on the phone where I think my son was there, and, you know, I was there on the phone, and my other son was on the other phone. And what happened was, we were all discussing what was going to happen in the future. And it got quite animated, and it got reasonably heated, but it was okay, because this was just us working things out. But at the end of it, he said, my son that has already moved out, he said, "Listen, Mum, I love you." And I said, "I love you too, son." Okay? He said, "We just want everything to work out the best for everyone." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." You know, and that although we'd had quite an animated discussion, you know, for probably about an hour or 90 minutes before then, that we were all able to recognise that what we were looking at was finding the best solution so that everybody could be looked after, you know. And, you know, that's the thing, and I think that only comes out with people when the mother has been able to spend a lot of time at home with her children. Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking here. Vincent will be joining us in hour number 2. And he's got Bert Bertonis with him, and they will be discussing all sorts of things mechanical and to do with electrical circuits after the top of the hour news. But in the meantime, I've just got a few more minutes left with you, Cathy, and I would like to know if there's anything that you would like to just share with the class in closing of how they can overcome this problem that they might have of not knowing where to begin with learning preparedness type skills. If you had somebody that wanted to become involved with preparedness but really didn't know where to begin, what advice would you give them of how they could get started in learning how to be prepared for whatever might be coming down the track?
I think that the first thing I would say is just gather up your confidence that you can do it. And if you know someone that would be willing to teach you or talk to you or get books, resources, I mean, there's shows like this, there's YouTube videos, there's a lot on the internet. I think just try it. I really didn't have anybody teach me. My mom died when I was 8 years old, and my grandparents were too old to really teach me. They were not in good health by the time I came along. So I pretty much self-taught everything that I have done. So I would say just start doing it. Even if, like, let's say it's basic sewing skills. Even if you just get a couple $100 used machine, you can get a good machine. And even if all you do is mend and restitch seams that have come out or do hems, you can save yourself a lot of money. And basic cooking, just try it. And I think there's a sense of satisfaction once you start doing things and you do them with your own two hands. But I would say just start, even if it's 2 or 3 or 5% of your monthly grocery or your income that you can take, and just start buying, even if it's canned goods and bags of rice or things for the freezer, and just keep educating yourself. I would say get books and get the knowledge so that if you lose electricity or the internet, you can't find what you wanted to find, you have that information right in front of you. But I just think that just start, just be like a sponge and absorb as much as you can, and do basic skills. And if you know somebody that is wise, my husband's kind of like Vince. He knows just about everything, a little bit of everything about everything. In some areas, he's very talented in. And I'm on the domestic side. There's a lot that I have self-taught. I have been self-taught. And I guess as I made my mistakes, I learned from them. But I would just say just start doing it. You make the room, save money, don't go out to eat or don't buy expensive clothes. Just start preparing, and you get a sense of self-satisfaction that if things do go south, you at least have the knowledge. Maybe buy seeds, buy heirloom seeds, and at least you know you have that, and increase your garden and your ability to learn, like, what do you need to do to have a productive garden. But I wanted to say, too, Gwyneth, that before we get off the air, that I wanted to say that I feel like you are a very strong woman with many talents, and for you to raise 2 children on your own and to have your farm and to go what you have gone through, that I just think that you've had an incredible life, and that you really are a very strong and capable woman.
Well, thank you for that. There's been a lot of times when I know we've just had the bumper music, no whining, and there actually have been a lot of tears in there with me, and just basically me crying out to God for help. And I think that that's another thing that people need to not be afraid to do, is that they need to not be afraid to cry, because these are tragic times, but that they don't need to stop there. They don't need to be overwhelmed by their tears. They need to pray to God for guidance. And then after they've had a bit of a cry, they need to get up and they need to start doing something. And even if the results of that something are completely pathetic, and even if they fail, it sure beats just sitting there doing nothing. Thank you so much. I can hear the music again. Thank you so much for coming on air with us today, Cathy. It's been a real honor and a real privilege to speak with you. And we'll speak again next week. And I think that next week it'll be you interviewing me. And that will be quite interesting.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Bert is with us in California. We're going to be talking about electricity for this hour. And I heard the previous hour with Guineith and Cathy. And Guineith mentioned that she took a personality test. And came back that she was low on politeness. Guineith, you need to get your money back, because that is exactly wrong. You are extremely polite. And I just wanted to tell you that. And I talked with Bert just before the broadcast, and you had expressed interest in interviewing Bert about Nikola Tesla and the Philadelphia experiment. And I think that is it's something that we should do. I talked to Bert about it. He's up for it. And I did meet and talk personally for about a half an hour, Mrs. Finelli and I, with Al Bielek, who was there at the Philadelphia experiment. So, back in 1943. So, that would be a great broadcast. So I did want to tell you that. Bert is going to be continuing. Guineith, thank you so much for being with Cathy and taking the lead. Next time, Cathy can take the lead. And what you saw was USA Prepares instructors rising to a higher level where they actually ran the broadcast solo or in pairs. And I think that is an experiment that I wanted to do. And the reason I wanted to do it, there are many reasons. But one is I wanted to make sure that there was durability here at USA Prepares. So if anything happens to any one of us, USA Prepares can continue. And you saw it. Guineith, thank you so much for being with us.
That's quite all right. I'll go now.
Hey, and thank you for staying up late. Thank you for staying up late.
That's all right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's right. I'll probably actually just go across to GCN and I'll listen to this on the live stream.
No, that sounds great. That sounds great.
I'm actually really interested to hear what Bert Bertonis has to say today. Yeah.
Well, Bert Bertonis is a very, 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 very dear friend, and he's brilliant. Thank you, Guineith, for being with us.
Okay. Well, God bless.
Okay. Bert's with us. Welcome, Bert.
Yeah, hi, Vince. Hi, Guineith, if you're still there. Look forward to chatting with you live on the air this time next Friday.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
So Vince,
Bert,
I think we got a letter from a listener, so I think we want to start off with that if we can. It might get a little technical, so I'll try and bring it down to earth, but it had to do with RF interference from Bluetooth devices.
Okay. Why don't you read the email? Read the email. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, well, we went back and forth a couple of times, but I don't want to get overly technical, but basically, you had a caller. Can I mention his name? Is that okay? Or
absolutely.
Amit, and basically, he asked, "What is the interference from Bluetooth devices?" And remember, a lot of Bluetooth are earpieces, so we put them in your ear to listen. And I had mentioned on previous shows that I thought, in my opinion, Bluetooth is relatively safe because of the extremely low power levels involved, even when it is something like an earpod. But Amit's question was really two parts. One was, is the power level really safe? And the other was, what does the local oscillator radiation contribute? So, again, without getting too technical, almost all radio receivers, in order to demodulate, recover the signal in the receiver, and sometimes we also do the reverse image of the process in the transmitter. But in the receiver, we actually use a signal at the same frequency, just an unmodulated pure carrier, which we call a local oscillator. This concept is used in almost every radio receiver since the invention of radio, including all the advanced digital radios where we convert down to digital as soon as possible, down to baseband where we process it as a digital signal. We actually create internally a local oscillator signal. So Mitch's question is that dangerous? And the answer is generally no, because if it's a good design, that signal is only used for internal circuitry, and it's not really part of anything that gets radiated, and it shouldn't leak out of the device. The concept is that if you mix the pure local oscillator signal with the signal you're demodulating, and you do it in a mixer in the proper manner, what comes out is actually the information. And that's kind of, taking something that's very complex into one sentence. So, no, it shouldn't be dangerous. By the way, Vince, you know what the one radio that doesn't use a local oscillator is? The one type of radio receiver that is so simple and there is no local oscillator? You know what that radio receiver is?
Crystal radio?
You got it. That's it. Crystal radio, which is the most basic radio, is just a tuned circuit to the frequency you want to recover, a diode, which is just a rectifier, which basically recovers the AM modulation. So this really only works with AM modulation, like your broadcast band, and then a capacitor to just filter everything out. And that crystal radio with a big enough antenna can drive a headset. And that all that's really involved is 4 or 5 components, depending on how you count them. And so there's no local oscillator in that type of receiver. Unfortunately, a concept that simple can't really work in modern communications because that tuned circuit is just not narrow enough to pull the signals out. And then AM modulation is almost never used anymore. I mean, AM broadcast is probably one of the exceptions. Everything else is a more advanced type of modulation. So the crystal radio just really won't work for the vast majority of communications that we use nowadays. So I hope that answers Amit's question. And also as far as, the general radiation, again, it's in the milliwatt range. We're talking, 5 milliwatts or 1 milliwatt typically. So very, very low modulation because remember, it's only trying to communicate to your phone or to your computer or from your keyboard of your computer to the computer that's down below. So it's only going, a foot, couple of feet, that type of range. So very low power.
Did you ever make a crystal radio using a double-edged razor blade? I'm talking about in the 60s, 50s. We had those double-edged razor blades, and you could literally put a little piece of wire against it and detect a strong signal from a powerful station, and hook up a set of headphones to it. Have you ever done that?
No, I never did that. You know what I used for diodes that takes you back to an era of the 60s and 70s is computers were going through mass evolution. I mean, computer technology was just moving at astonishing pace from, really we were going from second generation transistor computers to, to the first integrated circuit computers. And there would be all these surplus computer boards from IBM and Berry computers at the hobby shops. And these boards would be chock full of diodes and transistors and other devices. And for whatever reason, these circuits used a lot of diodes. So I pulled my diodes off of those surplus circuit boards that work fine for crystal radios.
Mm-hmm. And class, if you're wondering, are we making this up? You can just type in, go to a search engine, DuckDuckGo, razor blade crystal radio, click on images, and you'll see it. And it's for real, and it works. So, Bert, what else do you have in mind for today's broadcast?
Well, I thought we'd pick up where we were the last time I was interviewing you about construction of your home. In particular, sort of what's in my wheelhouse and what I was intrigued by is the number of different cables that really we run through a modern house. Whether it be power, telco, security alarm, speaker audio. Of course, now everyone has to have Ethernet. So we would pick up where we left off, and we actually used your construction of your home. And I think we were somewhere around pouring the concrete, and you didn't have a lot of concrete you were pouring, but is it dry by now? From where were we, 2 weeks ago? Should all be dry now, and we can carry on where we left off.
Sure, it's dry. Yeah, and in every room, other than the bathrooms, including the kitchen, there are blue boxes. And these are those plastic boxes, and they have wires in them. There are 2 cable TV wires, RG59U. That's the old cable that was used for, from the cable companies. And 2 Cat5Es for internet, Ethernet, networking, and 1 or 2 telephone wires. And so we've got landlines everywhere, and it's in a star configuration. Star means it starts at one point and radiates out. So it's not daisy-chained. And many telephone systems, landlines, are daisy-chained. So they go, like to the kitchen, to the living room, to the bedroom, in a series. If anything fails along the way, which happens, the downstream connections are broken. So we don't do that. What we do is we have everything running from one point. And if anything fails, like let's say the dining room connection fails, it just affects the dining room. The living room, just the living room. The bedroom, just the bedroom. The studio, just the studio, etc. The kitchen. And so we can easily trace where the problem is. But we've never had a problem because all of our wiring was very carefully done. So what I've talked to some instructors, and they have, over the years, a telephone guy would come in and wire the house, and or they would put another phone in the bedroom, and they would just tag the wires on and go into the crawl space. And what would happen is those connections over time would degrade through the moisture and so forth. And so now where's the problem? You have to find it. Well, if you use a star configuration, rather than what's called a bus configuration. Bus is like a bus stop. And you go from one bus stop to the next bus stop to the next bus stop to the next bus stop. If you avoid that and you go with star configuration, you've got greater reliability and greater repairability. So those are my thoughts on that. Any comments?
Yeah, let's pick up on where the stars, where you put that when we come back.
Okay, very good. All right, Bert's with us, and he's interviewing me about how we wired the farm. We'll be right back. Joining us, Amit in Massachusetts. Welcome.
Yes, good morning, Vincent, and good morning, Bert.
Hi, Amit.
Yes, sir. So I saw your email about those two URLs. One was to explain that in-phase and quadrature design, and the second was for that polling Bluetooth transceiver or whatever. So the in-phase and quadrature was good because that emphasized the 90-degree separation between the two signals, and that can be a complex design because they can involve maybe matched filter or similar filters which are difficult to start with, but when they try to generate I and Q signals, yes, they can get tricky, and that may not be ideal 0 IF. But the second part was like, as I say, Microsoft help, that is technically accurate but practically useless because they were only limited to block diagram illustration of the Bluetooth architecture. So they really did not tell if constant polling or constant pinging is done to see presence of a signal. So I think you wrote that they practically work in that ISM band, that is industrial, scientific, and with measurement.
Yeah.
So is it the same way also for these utility meters, that is gas meter and power meter, which are remotely read by a vehicle going in the neighborhood? So I think unlike California, we still don't have smart meters in Massachusetts where I am. But we do have remote reading of these meters. So all I'm asking is that these transceivers, do they keep polling all of the time for the presence of a signal, that when that signal comes, then they will transmit the data or whatever they have stored for the gas consumption or power consumption, or in the case of Bluetooth, that it will begin to function once it detects a signal, and constant polling or constant pinging is needed to find whenever a signal is available.
Okay, good question. Again, this is probably above a lot of the listeners, but let me first cover what you mentioned in the beginning. The 0 IF with the I and Q is actually a very, very powerful type of architecture. And the idea is that you create two copies of the 0 IF signal 90 degrees apart in phase. And by doing that, by just taking an architecture where you mix that pure LO and set up two paths, one 0 degrees and one 90, you can then digitally demodulate almost any signal known to man with that architecture. So it is very, very common. We have solved the phase shift accuracy problem. It's generally pretty easy to do nowadays, especially if you do it with high-speed digital logic. So that's almost exclusively the architecture that's now used in most, modern receivers, radio receivers, including your iPhone. So, okay, getting to your real question about how much radiation is there from a smart meter. So the actual type of protocols that are used vary, but to maybe cut to the chase here, the meter is transmitting almost never if there's no reason for it to transmit. It's not. This isn't a type of application where there's constant need for communication. So its duty cycle of transmitting is almost zero. But I'm going to give you one big exception. And the big exception is when your home is used to relay the signals from any other home. And that is one of the common architectures.
But if I may interrupt you, I think in Massachusetts they still don't have the smart meters, so to speak. I think smart meters also control the power being consumed. But we just have meters which report to a passing vehicle which has that detection infrastructure, that it will sense that vehicle coming in the area and send the data accumulated over the past billing cycle.
Oh, no, okay, now I understand your question, and yes, it would be very little transmission because it gets cold.
Amit, please stay with us. I have a couple comments, and I know Bert does too. Please stay with us. Bert's with us in California, radio frequency engineer. Amit's with us in Massachusetts. On hold is David. And Amit, I've got a comment, and this is politically incorrect, but I'm going to provide this information. I have never done this. I don't ever intend to do this. But in a life-saving emergency, this is a possibility. So I am not advocating that. Now, back in the days of the telephone booth, you know that you'd put your dime in the telephone booth, and that dime would allow you a dial tone, and you could place a call. Now, if it were a local call for a dime, if that call did not go through, you'd hang up and you get your money back, right? So that means that the money, that 10 cents, and I'm not going to go too far with this, Bert, but I just want to use it as a partial example. That means that that dime went into limbo. And if the call went through, the money was collected and put into the coin box. If the call did not go through, the signal on the two wires into that telephone was reversed and the money was returned to you. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is not for you to do this, and it's very hard to do anyway, because the wires are all buried in concrete, and the phone booths have been removed. But in the case of a smart meter, if you're in an emergency situation, and if life and death is dependent on having medical equipment running at your home, oxygen generators, that kind of a thing, and if your meter is disconnected by mistake and you can't get it turned back on remotely, you can. And if you want to know how to do it, just go to YouTube and look up smart meter turn back on. It's only 2 wires. Now, it's dangerous, it's illegal, but I'm just mentioning that it can happen in the same kind of technology that I described with the phone booth. But do not do that unless everything is broken down and unless people are going to die in your home because of no electricity. So I just wanted to share that. You can look that up on YouTube. Now, I've never done it. I understand the concept. I don't ever intend to do it. But I'm just saying that if they can turn off your meter without showing up, the way they used to, and you're talking about the smart meter deployment, and that's one of the reasons why smart meters have been deployed, so they can well, we'll just shut these meters off because, well, for whatever reason, non-payment, whatever it is, they can do it. And there's no exposure of the utility guy showing up and being challenged by the homeowner saying, hey, I've got my grandfather's in bed and he's going to die without electricity. Don't turn it off. They'll just shut it off. Okay? So I just wanted to share that with you. Amit, back to you.
Yes. Yes, I was just asking, Bert, that there should be a mechanism to wake up these meters when a vehicle is passing by. So if that is true, how that's accomplished?
Okay, so Amit, I am not an expert in the polling type of smart meter that you're mentioning and is deployed in Massachusetts. I'm just going to go out on a limb and hazard a guess, though, that because it's waiting to be awoken, there's going to be very little transmission because the meter is just sitting there waiting and in receive mode, and then it sends out a burst when it's woken up. So again, I don't have specific knowledge of how your system works, but I'm going to guess that it's very low transmit mode, and so therefore probably not a safety issue.
Class, let me share this with you. Amit is exactly right on the money. He talked about block diagrams for systems operations, and so when at a high level in a meeting with management, the engineers would say, well, this happens in this box, and then the signal goes on to this box, and then this happens, and decisions are made, etc. So it's a high level block diagram. Okay, well, when I was running for the board of directors of Laclede Electric Cooperative, an electric utility, I called up the smart meter manufacturers, and I said, I'm running for the board of directors, and I want to know how these smart meters work. Do you know what? I couldn't get any information. It's absolute. I mean, they won't tell you a thing. It's a deep, deep secret how these smart meters work. So, class, what I'm telling you, if you think that you're going to be able to know the signaling, the frequencies, the routing, how the networking works, the protocols, forget it. It's not going to happen unless you're a deep hacker. Okay? And it's going to take years. So I'm very serious about that, Amit. Very serious. Because I got nowhere.
I write you separately about the joke about Microsoft Help being technically accurate, but actually useless. So you are giving a perfect example of the depth that is really needed to understand what is going on.
Yes. By the way, I wanted to comment. Bert, you and Amit used a term, and it's two letters, L and O. And class, when they said LO, they did not mean the word low, with two letters rather than three. They meant local oscillator. Okay? I just wanted to share that with you. And Amit, here's what you and Bert have done. Something that we have been advised by a few people not to do. We have raised the bar. The two of you guys have raised the bar to the college level. Actually, at least mid-college level, electrical engineering, electronic engineering as I know it. And I am impressed. And we are not going to lower the bar. We are not interested in having every 4-year-old understand what we're talking about. We are interested in preparedness. And preparedness is simply looking at the long run. The long run. Okay. Impulse is going to the gas station for a soda. Look, I'm thirsty. Didn't think about that before you left and got in your car that you might be thirsty. Going to the gas station and getting that soda. That's the opposite of preparedness. We are interested in preparedness, and that's the long run. That means you buy more than you need, so you have what you need before you need it. Okay? Amit, anything else? We've got David on hold.
And I thank you. I say thank you to Bert for dropping that ISM band term. I heard it at least after 2 decades. ISM band, that's everywhere, but conveniently transparent or ignored by most of us. So thank you, Bert.
Yeah,
I have
welcome.
I have a question for you, Amit, and you can answer this any way you want. I've made the claim that Bert is a brilliant engineer. You challenged him at a significant level, way, way, way above the level that, a talk show guest would be challenged. What was your reaction to his response?
No, Bert is very practical. That is, I think he has a lot of knowledge about how these things work, and that's why he is hesitant about guessing what is going on in Massachusetts for those polling meters, not really smart meters which are supposed to turn off power or turn down power. So I have great respect for him.
And so do I. Amit, thank you very much. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you, Vincent, and thank you, Bert.
Very good.
Thanks,
Thank
Amit.
you, Amit.
Bye.
Yeah, there he goes. Okay, David in Illinois. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
I hope I didn't get you mad by calling in. They didn't.
Of course not. Of course not. But
okay.
No, David.
Yes.
Do you mind if I tell Bert a little bit about who you are so he knows?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Okay. Bert, David in Illinois is a USA Prepares instructor. And when he was a child, he was approached by John Wayne Gacy, the mass murderer. And David escaped. David and his boyfriend. Yeah, David and his boyfriend. And I don't mean that in a sexual way. Back when I was growing up, I had boyfriends. And I had girlfriends. And they were girls and they were guys. And we were just friends. And we played together. And, so it was not any kind of, any innuendo here. It's just, his boyhood friend. And he were approached and they escaped with their lives, which is a wonderful thing. So I just want to let you know that is, part of David in Illinois' experience profile. Okay, David, back to you.
I have a Bluetooth one. I've been waiting for you to come on so I can ask this question. I have a Bluetooth device that I've picked up accidentally, purely by accident, that's coming, I believe it's coming somewhere from in my house. And I've been trying, I kind of nailed it down. But one of my questions is Bluetooth, it does not transmit very far, does it?
No.
I'm losing the signal when I go out of the house. It's in the house somewhere on the one side of the house, but I lose the signal. And I found it totally by accident when I was working and seeing wireless devices here for my wife, and she was having so many problems, so I turned on developer options in the Android devices, and it happened to pop up then when I had it snoop for devices that were not allowed to be accessed, and it showed up. So I put on another device, and it found it too. But like when I use that device to call the show, it's gone on that device. It's not. I didn't put it there. I wouldn't have put this there. But it still shows up on the other device, but not that one. And I haven't been able to. I don't do computer work anymore, so I don't have any of my equipment to find signals more detailed. So how far does it usually transmit? And do you have any ideas of how I can try to get more pinpoint to where this device may be?
Yeah, okay, so all good questions. So, yes, Bluetooth is, by definition, a very low-power protocol. As far as whether you see it on certain devices when you're looking to pair or just scan for things to connect to, remember, those devices aren't just looking for the energy from, say, a Bluetooth transmitter. They're also looking for a little bit more information that they know they can handshake or synchronize with it. So they may leave out a lot of devices that are still transmitting. The only way I know of to find everything that is truly coming into your home is to use a spectrum analyzer. And, we use them here at the lab all the time. I even have a portable one you can use. And those will identify the signal at any frequency. And can't always tell you what the signal is. Usually you can tell Bluetooth, though, because it's a frequency hop type device. And again, not to get too technical, but frequency hop means it's constantly changing from different channels. And so it's hopping all through the 2.4 gigahertz band, instantaneously on one of many, many channels. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that might explain why you can see that on some devices and not on others.
Well, it only goes off of my one device that I use to show, and I cannot find it at that particular time when I'm listening to this particular show. When I normally call in, would listen to, and I've called into another show late at night, and it would go off, and I can't see it on that device that I usually use on that device either. And sorry,
David. So to help Bert out, I think what David is asking is, how can he detect Bluetooth spying? How can he detect Bluetooth spying? Is that what you're saying, David?
Yes, because it said what it is. The name popped up, and I was shocked the name popped up.
All right. Hold that thought. We'll be right back with David. Plus, I just want to mention one thing before we go back to David and Bert. When I talked about smart meter turning them back on, that's an emergency, extreme measure. That's only for life-saving, life and death emergencies. And if you do that, you are likely to go to jail. You are likely to be arrested and prosecuted and go to jail. Now, what you're weighing, I'm not talking about stealing electricity. I'm talking about saving a life. If you happen to decide to do that in an extreme situation like that, expect to go to jail. Expect cruel and unusual punishment. And you'll be weighing that against saving a life. Okay? So I am not recommending it. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying it can be done. I'll also tell you that when we built our house, I built it very energy efficiently. And we had our wiring is underground from 1,300 feet from the road all the way to the house. And after about a month, the utility company came over here, and they're looking around and checking the seals on the meter, and they're looking at the connections and making sure that, nothing had been violated and tampered with. Because they couldn't figure out how come we were using so little electricity. And it's not because we were stealing it. It's because we designed a energy efficient home. The walls in this home are a foot thick, not 3.5 inches, a foot thick. And we use closed cell foam, and we have a really high efficiency heating system. And our electric consumption at the time when we were on grid was 1/4 the average. So they thought, this guy's running his whole farm and he's using 1/4 of the electricity of just the typical house? How's that possible? It's possible by design and conservation. Okay? So what I'm saying is, if they notice an irregularity on the delivery of electricity, and they'll notice it, they're going to come and get you. So I want to make sure that I explain this very carefully. Don't do it unless someone's going to die, or unless you think someone's going to die. Let's not even say it that way. If you choose to do it, expect to get arrested. Okay? David, back to you. And your question deals with finding these frequencies that you cannot see. How do you find them? Is that the question?
Yes. Now, he brought up and he said the signal changes. Now, I flipped off all the power surge protectors and to see if it was a device that I had, which we don't have a lot of those devices. But now, my understanding is when you're looking in the closest Bluetooth signal should show up on the list first. So that's my understanding. So the closer I get to it, it shows up right at the top. But when you said how it changes frequencies and scans, would that explain why it goes off, on, off, on, off on the screen right at the top of the list the closer I get?
No. What I was describing was that, so in operation, it's constantly very rapidly transmitting on different channels, but that wouldn't explain what you're finding. I've actually seen what you're describing, and are you saying that you see something appearing and you're not sure who or what is the Bluetooth device, and you see it popping in and then popping out? Is that what you're saying?
It said the Bluetooth device, and when I found it, when it showed up, I was kind of surprised because of the name that was there and why that would be picking up on my devices in my home. So it had to be placed there. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I had to send a picture of the image to somebody else to see that, yes, I seen it, they seen it, but it's showing there, and I can't find. I lose the signal when I go to the other part of the house. When I go to that house, it goes up the list all the way up to the top, and that's probably as close as I can get. And it's like right. I kind of know the area, but I flipped off everything to make sure it wasn't coming from my devices anywhere. I flipped off the power to everything, and it's still showing up. But when I go out of the house,
you know that all cell phones have Bluetooth. So could this be a neighbor or someone in your family's cell phone?
We only have the cell phones that we have that I've seen the device show up on. I am in a house farther away from other people, and nobody else is in here with cell phones. So when we go outside, I walked around the house to see if I still had the signal. Once I go out of the house and go to my yard, I lose the signal. It comes back when I go in the house. It shows up on the device. Only those two devices.
Okay. A lot of things use Bluetooth, including, wireless keyboards, mice, but it's interesting. I think you really want to track down something. A portable spectrum analyzer would help you do it because you can follow the signal strength. But those aren't easy to come by. There are lower cost devices. You can find them on the internet that will also track down signals, but they're just not as accurate as having a spectrum analyzer. But you can, and then of course the last thing is you can hire a private investigator to scan your home, and they'll find everything.
Bert, we're out of time. Would you send me a link to an inexpensive used type model that I can mention, spectrum analyzer?